In this book, Bachelard explores how human beings relate to fire, not as a purely physical or chemical phenomenon, but as a symbol charged with deep psychological, cultural, and imaginative meaning. For Bachelard, fire is not merely a natural element. It is a mirror of desire, creativity, destruction, and transformation. The text operates at the intersection of philosophy, psychology, mythology, and literature, seeking to uncover how human imagination projects itself upon one of nature's most fascinating forces. 1. The aim and method of Bachelard's study. Bachelard's project is an attempt to build what he calls a psychoanalysis of objective knowledge. By this, he means a form of analysis that seeks to reveal how unconscious drives and archetypal images influence the ways people think about the natural world. Just as Sigmund Freud analyzed dreams to expose hidden desires, Bachelard analyzes scientific and poetic thought to uncover the psychological motivations behind them. In the psychoanalysis of fire, he begins with the premise that every natural element, fire, water, air, and earth, stimulates certain emotional and imaginative responses. Each element becomes a kind of complex, a psychic configuration shaped by myths, personal experiences, and cultural narratives. Fire, for example, evokes warmth, light, life, purification, but also passion, destruction, and death. Bachelard believes that these contradictory associations reveal the ambivalence at the heart of human imagination. Unlike empirical science, which studies fire through chemistry and physics, Bachelard's analysis is phenomenological and hermeneutic. He wants to understand how people experience fire and how that experience shapes their ways of knowing. He calls his approach psychoanalysis because it reveals the libidinal, unconscious roots of our fascination with fire, the desire to possess, control, and merge with it. Haber 2. Fire as desire and sexual symbol. One of Bachelard's key insights is that fire is profoundly erotic. It is connected to what he calls sexualized reverie, a form of imaginative contemplation that unites pleasure and danger. Fire's warmth and light attract humans as if it were alive. To gaze at a flame is to feel an almost sensual connection. The flickering movement of fire, its rhythmic dance, stimulates fantasies of union and transformation. Bachelard observes that many myths and literary works depict fire as a symbol of passion and forbidden desire. Prometheus stealing fire from the gods becomes, in this interpretation, a metaphor for transgressive curiosity and the erotic urge to possess the divine. Fire seduces humanity just as sexual desire seduces the individual. Both are forces that can create or destroy, depending on how they are used. At the same time, Bachelard draws on Freudian psychoanalysis to interpret fire as an image of sublimation, the transformation of raw libido into intellectual or creative energy. To play with fire, therefore, is both a literal and symbolic act. It is to confront one's inner drives, to risk being consumed by one's own imagination, yet also to achieve new insight through this dangerous intimacy. 3. Fire, knowledge, and the ambivalence of progress. Bachelard is deeply interested in the connection between fire and knowledge. Since the beginning of civilization, fire has been a symbol of enlightenment, of the human capacity to transform nature and to dominate it through technique. Yet he insists that this Promethean mastery hides a psychological drama. Fire allows humans to cook food, forge metal, and create art, but it also represents the temptation to go beyond limits. The alchemist's furnace, the blacksmith's forge, and the scientist's laboratory all testify to the human desire to recreate life and matter. In this sense, the history of science is, for Bachelard, inseparable from the history of desire. Scientific inquiry is never purely rational. It is animated by affective and imaginative impulses. However, Bachelard also warns against the dangers of this ambition. The same fire that brings warmth can burn the one who touches it. The myth of Prometheus reminds us that knowledge acquired through transgression may carry punishment. Thus, fire becomes a symbol of both progress and catastrophe, a dialectical force that reveals the moral complexity of human invention. 4. Fire and the imagination of purification. Another recurring theme is fire's power of purification. In myth and religion, fire cleanses impurities and renews existence. From the flames of ritual sacrifice to the purgatorial fires of Dante, it symbolizes spiritual transformation. For Bachelard, this idea of purification reflects a psychological need to reconcile opposites: destruction and renewal, death and rebirth. The desire to burn what is impure reveals an unconscious longing for moral and emotional clarity. When people burn objects, letters, mementos, or relics, they enact a symbolic purgation of memory. Bachelard interprets this as a form of psychological catharsis. The destruction of matter mirrors the purification of the soul. Fire, in this sense, becomes the most spiritual of all elements, mediating between the material and the immaterial. He also notes how poets such as Baudelaire, Shelley, and Novalis used fire imagery to express longing for transcendence. In their works, fire appears as an intermediary between earthly passion and divine illumination, a ladder of light ascending from sensuality to spirituality. 5. Childhood, memory, and the poetics of fire. Bachelard's analysis often returns to the theme of childhood. He believes that our relationship to fire begins in infancy, when curiosity and fear first intertwine. The child who stares at a candle flame experiences a mix of wonder and temptation, the desire to touch what must not be touched. This primal encounter with fire becomes the foundation of many later psychological attitudes toward desire, knowledge, and danger. In one of the most lyrical passages of the book, Bachelard describes the child's fascination with the hearth, the center of warmth, storytelling, and family life. Around the fire, imagination awakens. It becomes a source of dreams and myths. The fire's glow creates a sacred space where the boundaries between self and world dissolve. This nostalgic reverie explains why so many poets associate fire with intimacy and home. Thus, Bachelard's psychoanalysis is also a poetics of memory. Fire connects the adult's intellectual curiosity with the child's primal wonder, linking scientific discovery with emotional experience. 6. The 4 fire complexes. Bachelard identifies several fire complexes that structure human imagination. These are recurrent psychological patterns through which people relate to fire. 1. The Promethean complex, representing the desire to steal divine secrets and to master nature. 2. The Empedoclean complex, reflecting the mystical belief in fire as the universal principle of life. 3. The Novalis complex, expressing the romantic identification of fire with love, poetry, and the feminine soul. 4. The Hoffman complex, exploring the destructive fascination with fire, the pyromaniac's obsession with flames. Each complex reveals a different psychological orientation toward the world: mysticism, romance, and destruction. For Bachelard, understanding these complexes helps explain why human thought about fire oscillates between scientific curiosity and mythic reverie. The Alchemist and the Scientist. A major part of the psychoanalysis of fire examines alchemical and pre-scientific conceptions of fire. Bachelard argues that early chemists were guided as much by imagination as by experiment. The alchemist's furnace was not only a laboratory, but also a spiritual crucible in which matter and soul were transformed together. In this sense, alchemy embodies the poetic origin of science. The alchemist projects psychological desires, immortality, power, redemption, onto physical substances. Fire becomes the agent of these transformations, both real and symbolic. Bachelard does not ridicule these ancient practices. Instead, he sees in them the seeds of modern scientific creativity. Rational knowledge, he argues, must always wrestle with its imaginative roots. To deny the poetic dimension of science would be to ignore the deep human passions that drive discovery. 8. Fire, death, and the desire for annihilation. While much of the book celebrates fire's creative and purifying powers, Bachelard also confronts its darker aspect, its relation to destruction and death. Fire fascinates because it consumes. Watching something burn produces both horror and fascination. This paradox leads Bachelard to explore the psychology of pyromania, the erotic pleasure derived from seeing things destroyed. He interprets this not as mere pathology, but as a manifestation of an unconscious drive toward totality. The fire that annihilates also reveals unity. Everything reduced to ashes becomes one. Thus, the desire for destruction can mask a deeper metaphysical longing for the dissolution of boundaries and the return to elemental simplicity. Fire's destructive beauty also explains its frequent use in apocalyptic and revolutionary imagery. Flames symbolize the end of one world and the beginning of another. Style and influence. Bachelard's style in the psychoanalysis of fire is highly poetic, even mystical. He combines philosophical argument with literary analysis, quoting poets and mystics as readily as scientists. His prose often mirrors the very phenomenon he studies. bright flickering, full of sudden illumination.